and Communication CARIMAC, Professor Hopton Dunn. Director of CARIMAC, WJC, Mr. Stephen Campbell. Special guest speaker, Mr. Kenneth Gordon. Deputy Mayor, Leroy Williams from Montego Bay. Digital Media Officer, Suen Thompson. Technician at the Jamaica Information Service and the journalist, Garwin Davis. Mark Titus, enterprise reporter from the Gleaner and Company. Other distinguished guests, family, friends, members of staff, students. A very pleasant evening to you all, and welcome to the University of the West Indies Western Jamaica Campus Annual CARIMAC Public Lecture. Get It Together, the Role of Media in Caribbean Integration, is a public lecture which came about after we, a group of students from the Communication Analysis and Planning CAP class, saw that there was a need for further regional integration. This group, after extensive research, aimed to have this lecture explore the roles media play, or should play, if any, in the integration of the Caribbean. Despite the fact that this project was conceptualized through our CAP class, I must say it goes well beyond academic purposes, which you will see as we move through this evening's proceedings. I would now like to introduce our Master of Ceremonies, who will guide us through the rest of the program. President of the Western Jamaica Media Association, WJMA, former director of the Press Association of Jamaica, editor of the Gleaner's Hospitality Jamaica magazine, a first-class honors graduate with a Bachelor of Arts degree in Media and Communication from CARIMAC UWI WJC. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you none other than Miss Janet Silvera.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Good evening. I must say that when I heard the name Ken Gordon, that was one of my main reasons for accepting to be here this afternoon. Because to see that a group of CAP students have been able to pull off such a feat, I felt I had to be part of this. Congratulations to the team. The team includes an Antiguan, a Trinidadian, a young lady from St. Kitts and Nevis, and 2 Jamaicans. Talk about getting it together, and that is exactly what they have done. Ladies and gentlemen, I want you to put your hands together and give them a round of applause for bringing a man that we all thought we could not get to Jamaica, even though we were close friends with his son. But they did it, yes, talking about the son by the name of Douglas Gordon. Usually I don't wear my glasses when I'm doing these things, but I thought I'd look studious this evening, so I'm gonna continue to wear them. I always think that my glasses make me look older and that I'm prettier without them, but I really can't see without them. So we have some housekeeping that we need to do before we start officially. If anyone is posting about the event, and we should not really say that, we want you to post about the event. So we ask that you post, and if you do post, the event's hashtags are Get It Together and One Caribbean. In fact, I think we should try to get us trending. What do you say about that, eh? Yes. The main entrance, if you need to leave this room during the lecture, is to my right and to your left. So in order not to disturb what's happening, we ask that you use that entrance. In the likely event of an emergency, the emergency assembly point is in the front car park near the entrance and the security booth. We want to, of course, acknowledge our sponsors. Without our sponsors, this could not be possible. And so we want to recognize Caribbean Airlines, Sandals Resorts International, Elite Concepts and Solutions, Margaritaville, Now, ladies and gentlemen, we invite you to stand for the Jamaican national anthem.
Eternal Father, bless our land. Guide us with thy mighty hand. Keep us free from evil powers. Lead our life through countless hours. To our leaders, great defenders, grant true wisdom from above. Justice, truth be yours forever. Jamaica, land we love. Jamaica, 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 land we love. Teach us true respect for all. Stir response to duty's call. Strengthen us the weak to cherish. Give us visions lest we perish. Knowledge sent us, heavenly Father, grant true wisdom from above. Justice, truth be yours forever. Jamaica, land we love. Jamaica, 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 land we love.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. You may now be seated. I'm about to introduce a gentleman to you, but I know that you all know him because he's one of our favorite lecturers. I don't know how much of a lecturing he does these days because he's so very busy being acting campus director. One thing I can tell you is that I was one of the most fortunate persons to have been a student in his classes. He's one of the best that this university could ever have. And I'm sure that some of the students that no longer have him as a lecturer are very disappointed. Ladies and gentlemen, I speak about no other than Patrick Prendergast, who heads this university at this time. Mr. Prendergast is also a graduate of the University of the West Indies, Mona, with specialization in the areas of social marketing, television production, and communication for social and behavior change. He was more popularly known for his work as writer, director, and producer with the Jamaica Broadcasting Corporation, which later became Television Jamaica. Ladies and gentlemen, help me to welcome Acting Director of the University of the West Indies, Western Jamaica Campus, Mr. Patrick Prendergast.
Thank you, Chair. I think probably if you do a survey, though, you may end up with another word, not disappointed, but happy. I heard mention of Deputy Mayor, guest speaker, Mr. Gordon, Prof. Dunn, colleague lecturers, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, all. Good afternoon. Let me, on behalf of Professor Archibald MacDonald, the Pro-Vice Chancellor and Principal of UWI Mona, apologize for his absence. Honestly, were it not for the fact that he was overseas on university business, he would have really wanted to be here. I will, however, share the essence of his remarks with you in a couple minutes. But first, let me say that as a campus, as the campus director as well, I'm extremely happy to welcome you all to the University of the West Indies Mona Western Jamaica campus, and especially to this CARIMAC WJC public lecture, Get It Together, the Role of Media in Caribbean Integration. This event has significance to me, both on a personal level as well as on a campus level. The CARIMAC at WJC public lecture was first delivered in April 2010 as a direct response to the need for the university to be actively engaged with the public in higher level academic discourse generally, but more specifically, how the globalization of culture was being driven by the technological shifts in information transmission. 7 years and varied media and communication topics later, the lecture still stands. But more importantly, I believe it now holds pride of place as a calendar activity for the campus and not just for CARIMAC as it was then. So I'm happy to see that it has been incorporated, or better yet, integrated in the course delivery, and that the students have not only embraced its potential for advancing the teaching and learning experience, but have also managed to take the lecture to a higher level of planning and delivery. And I really want you to put your hands together for the team that's putting this event on this evening. Getting it together is about getting it right. And so I say to the students who are responsible for staging this year's lecture, I hope that the many lessons learned will be translated into you becoming the best in your area of endeavor in this fast-changing, relationship schizophrenic, and more siloed and faceless world, where certainly to me, integration is not so much about finding the means to incorporate diversity for better, but rather about the alignment of similarities into a mode of cooperation. Therefore, today's lecture, in the words of Principal MacDonald, speaks on a highly topical issue that has a significant impact on all our lives. That is Caribbean integration. In our journey towards becoming a truly singular region, the principal notes, the concept of integration brings to the fore a multitude of concerns and issues that have supported and impeded complete Caribbean integration over the years. From cultural and religious diversity to a regional environment that is defined by multiple identities, the idea of Caribbean integration is based on a platform of differences and diversity that have helped to make this region truly unique. One of the unifying threads that can aid in supporting further integration is the role played by the media in sharing and exploring our multifaceted community. Media, he continues, are the primary source for news and information for the everyday man, whilst also acting as a repository for our history, ideas, and social development that will aid in furthering our movement towards full integration. The media allows the nations across the region to explore the varieties of life that define our quintessential regional experience, whilst providing us with an opportunity to question and critically assess certain concerns that may impede our path toward integration. It essentially acts as a mirror for the lives, cultures, and practices defining the Caribbean region. It is critical then that as a people, We understand media completely if we are to ever make that final step towards complete integration. Both the principal and I, therefore, welcome a lecture of this nature. We welcome to the campus your distinguished speaker for this evening, Mr. Ken Gordon, who is himself a champion integrationist and media industry player, and whose story is indeed as phenomenal as the evolution of the Caribbean mediascape. We welcome you all and hope that today's engagement will be a meaningful one for you individually and collectively as a city, a country, and a region. Once again, congratulations to the organizers of today's lecture. We appreciate your hard work. We appreciate the effort at bringing to the fore this all-important topic of Caribbean integration and the role media play in achieving that. On behalf of the principal and the management team, thank you all for attending, and please do enjoy the evening's activities. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much, Mr. Prendergast. He couldn't have said it better as it relates to the team that put this together. Let me tell you something. When I came to this university, as a student, we used to call ourselves the A team. And we never thought there was any other team that would come as close. But I can tell you that the organizers of this particular event behaved far better and did far better than my A team. And I want to just say, ladies, congratulations. Let me tell you something, Mr. Campbell. They called me every week. They sent me updates on what was happening. They wanted me here by 4 p.m., which meant that I could not be late. And they sent me a script because they didn't want me to be chatting all evening. Okay. So I must say that they were quite prepared and that they deserve an A+ for this one. I know I don't have anything where that is concerned, any impact on that, but I know that they're going to do very well with this CAP project. So, ladies and gentlemen, we're now about to do a introduction of the guest speaker, but we're doing it via a montage. So we invite you to watch and listen to this incredible integrationist, you call him? Yes. I feel that's a very good word to describe Ken Gordon. I have so much admiration for this man. Ladies and gentlemen, now watch and listen and hear about this man. Thank you.
This stalwart in the media industry began his career working at Radio Trinidad in 1948 as a broadcast journalist. He later worked at Trinidad Chamber of Commerce in the capacity of general manager. In 1969, he became managing director of the Trinidad Express newspaper. He was principal in establishing the first privately owned television station in the English-speaking Caribbean, CCN TV 6. Additionally, he played vital roles in establishing the Observer in Jamaica, Nation newspaper in Barbados, Starbrook News in Guyana, and the Tobago News. He has been inducted into the Caribbean Broadcasting Union and the Trinidad and Tobago Chamber of Industry and Commerce Hall of Fame. This stalwart in the media industry began his
Ladies and gentlemen, please help me to welcome Mr. Ken Gordon to the lectern. Mr. Gordon, we're ready for you, sir. Yes, of course. You're welcome, sir.
I don't want to. Madam Chairman, Mr. Director, Mr. Campus Director, or Mr. CARIMAC Director, forgive me. Good afternoon or good evening, ladies and gentlemen. You can do me one favor, though, before I start, which is please convince anybody who has to do any further note, don't call me media mogul. Please. It's an old story, but I won't bore you with that this afternoon. My friends, it's always a pleasure to have a good reason to visit Jamaica, and even more pleasurable when Jamaica has done as well as it has done recently. Jamaica's resilience in surviving its difficulties is a story I've told often with great Caribbean pride. I can't claim Jamaican, but I can claim Caribbean pride. There was a period when I spent 3 and sometimes 4 days every month in Jamaica. I came with Carl Hendrickson, who was then doing the Daily News. And just as the paper had begun to turn a profit, Michael Manley's government at the time bought it over. He bought over control. Well, I resigned because press freedom and independence and government ownership are things that don't go together. Unfortunately, the paper died shortly after. What will never be forgotten was a pattern of ongoing crisis which Jamaica had to contend with at that time. I would leave 1 month with a major national issue threatening to bring the country to a standstill. By the time I returned the following month, that problem had been settled, if not overcome, and replaced by another that was equally disturbing. And this continued with unfailing regularity. So, heartiest congratulations, Jamaica. You've come through very stormy times, and while the struggle continues, let the watchword now be forward ever, backward never. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and the Caribbean Institute of Media and Communications for having me as your guest today. Your invitation to share my experiences in assessing the role the media has played in fostering Caribbean integration is one I accept with pleasure. Let us begin by having a look at Dr. Eric Williams, the political inspiration of Caribbean integration. How his public ventilation on this theme expanded the social conscience of the Caribbean business community into taking regional initiatives. We will explore first how CARIFTA, then CARICOM, came into existence, how the CARICOM news agency CANA was launched, and the impact on the region by increasing Caribbean coverage supplied by Reuters at the time from 3,000 words per day to more than 20,000 words per day delivered to Caribbean newsrooms by CANA. You will hear how UWI's Vice Chancellor Preston frustrated Eastern Caribbean Prime Minister's initiatives to establish a school publishing textbook program and confronted Prime Minister Eugenio Charles in doing so. We will look at how Carnival was transformed from foreign to local ownership. We will look at a number of bold interventions from an indigenous Caribbean media and how they altered the course of events. And finally, I will share with you some of the lessons of 50 years. Through fortuitous circumstance, I've been involved in different incarnations of Caribbean integration. So forgive the many references to my personal involvement and blame it on a desire for authenticity rather than trumpet blowing, no pun intended. Since many of the events were rather involved, I must tell you they were all part of a political minefield. So it is important to understand Williams's role, and let's deal with that. He was the Chief Minister and Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago for more than 25 years. A scholarly historian, he fell out with his employers, the Caribbean Commission, and founded the PNM, the political party which would form the government of that country for more than 30 years. Many argue that he was the most outstanding Caribbean leader of his time, for he inspired a generation of scholars throughout the region with his powerful message of Caribbean unity. He forged his powerful base of political support through a combination of intellect, dialogue, and practical socialism, and in the process dismantled relics of colonialism and built around he built his personality, I must say, around the unique mystique of inaccessibility. Not for him, the loud-mouthed denunciation of the moneyed classes which was so popular with the radicals of the day. He centralized control of the economy, narrowed the gaps in society, and had no apology for the fact that his selective approach in doing so was frequently based and influenced by political considerations. One of his inspirational strengths was his gift for language. Mother India. But perhaps his most powerful message to the country he led for a quarter of a century was delivered at the time of its independence on August 31st, 1962. And I quote him, "There can be no Mother India for those whose ancestors came from India. There can be no Mother Africa for those of African origin. There can be no Mother China, even if one could agree as to which China was the mother. And there can be no Mother Syria and no Mother Lebanon. A nation, like an individual, can have only one mother. The only mother we recognize is Mother Trinidad and Tobago, and a mother cannot discriminate between its children." Unquote. He was a classical example of an outstanding leader who was a terrible manager. He was particularly indifferent to managing people and is known to have stopped speaking to his personal secretary for 6 months, communicating only by note. The story of Caribbean unity is saddened by the fact that its intellectual father died a lonely and disillusioned man, the failure of Caribbean integration being one of his greatest disappointments. The transformation of the private sector in the Caribbean. He did, however, succeed in embarrassing the private sector, and in particular, the Trinidad Chamber of Commerce, into becoming an important and aggressive player in national affairs. He frequently and publicly criticized business people for their laid-back and self-serving, what he called commission agent mentality. This, coupled with an aggressive body of younger businessmen in the Junior Chamber of Commerce, who became the voice of the business community because there was a vacuum at the top. But this triggered a private sector which moved aggressively throughout the Caribbean to strengthen itself. That was the beginning of strengthening of the private sector. I was appointed general manager of the Trinidad Chamber in 1962 and suggested to the then president of the newly resurrected body, Angus Mackay, that we visit the Caribbean islands to seek support for restructuring a representative Caribbean organization. That led to my becoming Caribbean representative on international organizations like the Chambers of Commerce of the Americas and the World Press Freedom Committee, which played important roles in the level for press freedom at the international sphere. We prepared an action plan and made a highly successful visit throughout the region. It sowed the seeds of free trade throughout the Caribbean, including the concept of promoting tourism and carnival. The advantages were obvious. It was a challenging program to a then conservative Caribbean, and the concept of carnival was more readily embraced in the smaller islands than in Jamaica and in Barbados. Jamaica found it genuinely difficult to digest all the implications of what might occur if carnival was introduced to their country, and they were concerned that crime, which had already become quite a problem in Jamaica, might prove a serious risk for masqueraders. Our Barbadian colleagues could not conceive their countrymen, and perhaps more pointedly countrywomen, gyrating in scantily clad clothing on the streets of Bridgetown. Today, there are carnivals in all the countries of the Caribbean, even in Barbados, where it has become the biggest event on their calendar. Let me admit that given the excesses which have now become a part of carnival, I have very mixed feelings about the wisdom of having done what we did. But our visit stimulated a despondent Caribbean. Remember, Federation had collapsed just the year before. A new collective vision began to emerge with our visit, which was the first ray of light to have followed the collapse of the Federation. How CARIFTA was launched. The reconstituted private sector was the beginning of accelerated regional activity, and the Caribbean Association of Industry and Commerce was formed. Funds were voted at its annual meeting in 1965 for me to attend a Commonwealth Press Union meeting in India. This at a time when the ill effects of Jamaica's withdrawal from the Federation were still hurting, when prime ministers and premiers were fighting on all sorts of issues and doing so publicly in the media. The political Caribbean climate was hostile. My response to the proposed visit was to suggest that instead of going to India, we apply that money to sending a delegation from the private sector to meet Caribbean leaders to discuss free trade within the region. Tommy Gatcliffe, a Trinidadian businessman, strongly supported the idea with a powerful speech about free trade throughout the region, and the Garnet Gordon Free Trade Mission was born. Sir Garnet Gordon, no relative, was a St. Lucian. A lawyer by profession, he was a former commissioner of the West Indies Trade Office in London and the chairman of Geest Banana Industries, and a man who gave new meaning to graciousness. The other members of the delegation were Aaron Matterlaw, the head of the aggressive and successful Matterlaw family in Jamaica, Sir Kenneth Hunt, then the major industrialist in Barbados, John Jardim, the leading businessman in Guyana, and Tommy Gatcliffe, the chairman of Angostura, and myself from Trinidad and Tobago. At 35 years of age, I used to be 35 years old, but at 35 years of age, the 5 weeks I spent in the company of those 5 men, visiting every Caribbean island, was the most instructive experience of my life. We met every Prime Minister and Governor General, every Chamber of Commerce, every trade union body and manufacturing association, and most of the business people, many of whom resurfaced in my life in one way or other in later years. There was a luncheon, cocktail party and dinner, and virtually every day. And we gave presentations to each audience using charts that were carefully prepared by Sir Kenneth Hunt which demonstrated in numbers the benefit that would flow to the people of the Caribbean from free trade. We frequently held 3 and 4 meetings each day with different governments and economic groups, with the stenographic assistance provided by the host country. Minutes were all dictated, typed, and approved before 9 a.m. the following morning. And that pattern was repeated every day for 5 weeks. When our mission began, few Caribbean leaders were even speaking to each other. We started in Jamaica, for given their withdrawal from the Federation, it was vital to have Jamaica on board for any discussion related to Caribbean cooperation in trade, for it to have a chance of succeeding. The Prime Minister, Sir Alexander Bustamante, was ill, and Mr. Sangster was acting Prime Minister. It was apparent that he lacked the confidence to deal forthrightly with so sensitive a situation. But then a man who changed it all emerged in Arthur Brown, the Jamaican government's financial secretary. Brown transformed the response with a strong supportive statement at the meeting that clearly disagreed with his acting Prime Minister's tentative response. Later that evening, the leader of our mission, Sir Garnet, received a telephone call from Sir Alexander Bustamante's residence, inviting him to visit. He returned to inform us that Sir Alexander had made it clear that Jamaica would participate in any discussion about free trade. This ended the ifs and buts from Mr. Sangster, who formally confirmed Jamaica's participation the following morning, and our mission was on its way. The courage and forthrightness of Arthur Brown was one of the highlights of a mission which pointed a new direction for the region. As we traveled down the Caribbean, the responses from prime ministers were all affirmative and immediate. Even Williams, who was initially coy, readily warmed when Jamaica's agreement was confirmed, and we conveyed to him the very positive response from Sir Alexander Bustamante. We made Guyana the final stop and invited Mr. Burnham to chair the meeting of Caribbean heads of government, having previously sought and obtained the conditional agreement of other heads to have him so invited. And in effect, Mr. Burnham was whatever else he was not. He was very well suited for the role of chairman. The meeting of the Caribbean heads of government was subsequently held. There was unanimous support for the concept of free trade, and the government machinery took over, leading first to CARIFTA and then to CARICOM. Unfortunately, with the passing of time, there may have been a blurring of events, and it has been suggested in Sir Alistair McIntyre's recent book, The Caribbean and the Wider World, that the initiative which brought CARIFTA into being stemmed from a meeting between Prime Ministers Burnham, Byrd, and Barrow, the 3 Bs they call themselves. This was incorrect, for no mention whatever was made of its genesis, the Garnet-Gordon private sector mission, and its Caribbean-wide initiative, which promoted free trade. Frankly, I was disappointed that so important a development could have been overlooked, and I have since spoken to Sir Alistair, who has asked me to say that he regrets this. He has asked me to make reference today to the vital and enlightened role played by the Caribbean private sector in getting the heads of government together at a time when so much acrimony existed. And he has in fact since written to me to convey his regret about that. It is important for purposes of the record to have the facts clearly established. 1, CARIFTA was the result of a regional private sector initiative by the Caribbean Association of Industry and Commerce. It was appointed as a self-financing mission, that word, self-financing. And they all paid their way with the exception of myself, because I was the general manager, but they paid their way for the 5 weeks of a commitment to integration. Secondly, it would not have happened without winning the support of Jamaica and without the major roles played by Sir Alexander Bustamante and Arthur Brown of that country. Thirdly, after the mission left Jamaica, it visited the leaders of Antigua and Barbados and obtained their support for free trade, together with that of the other regional prime ministers. Such support included agreement that Prime Minister Burnham be invited to be chairman of a meeting of Caribbean prime ministers to discuss free trade. Fourth, Mr. Barrow, who was a pilot, flew a small aircraft with much attendant publicity and collected Prime Minister Byrd. They flew to Guyana. This was done while the Garnett-Gordon mission at the time was still en route to Mr. Burnham, and they held discussions with Mr. Burnham, reaffirming their support for free trade. So this was the launching pad which led to the documentation and recommendations for the launching of CARIFTA and ultimately CARICOM. Whatever finally becomes of the concept of regional integration, the private sector and the media, which gave widespread and ongoing support to the work of the mission, has played its part most admirably. And I think it is one of the things on the record that I hope saying this publicly today will assist. The Caribbean News Agency, CANA. Sometime in 1974-1975, Bernard Bonser, the Rediffusion of London's chief executive for the Caribbean, convened a meeting to discuss a planned visit by a U.S. mission headed by Nelson Rockefeller of the United States to meet heads of Caribbean media. Those present were Bill Lupton, who ran the Trinidad Guardian and was Lord Thompson's Caribbean man on the spot, Kenna Black, who headed the Trinidad and Tobago government's information department, and myself as managing director of the fledgling Express newspaper. We got onto the subject of the Reuters news service and its very limited dissemination of Caribbean news, which was supplied, paradoxically, by a writer's man who sat at a desk in Barbados and received copy from Caribbean stringers operating as freelance journalists from each island. They sent their copy to the West Indies through London by telex, where it was edited and sent back to the West Indies and the media houses in the Caribbean, all paying a significant fee for information about their neighboring islands, frequently less than 100 miles away. And this existed year after year after year. It was called the Reuters Caribbean Service and was one of the absurdities of colonialism which should have long been abolished. A Black strongly supported my proposal that the time had come for change. The Rediffusion and Thompson representatives said little. I was then president of the Caribbean Publishing and Broadcasters Association, and we appointed a committee to study the implications of replacing Reuters with a Caribbean News Service. This was launched in 1976 with the assistance of UNESCO. Forgive me. The responses between the Caribbean's report and the decision to establish the Caribbean Service were threefold. One, predictably, the London media representatives wanted the Reuters status quo to remain unchanged. Two, initially a mixed response from Caribbean representatives, though support for CANA later intensified. Three, the Jamaican gleaner's Tom Sherman was adamantly opposed. He first argued that it would not be financially viable. This was disposed of by a careful feasibility study by UNESCO. Then Sherman fully declared his hand. He was convinced that Caribbean politicians could never be trusted to keep their hands off the proposed new service. It would be a propaganda tool, he argued, and he would have nothing to do with it, and he walked out. The vote was saved that day for Kana by Michael Gordon, again, no relative, of St. Lucia. He turned up for his first meeting in Guyana and gave support, and it was just as well that he did. Once approved, we proceeded without the Gleaner to establish the Caribbean News Agency. In a small way, this was history repeating itself, given Jamaica's earlier decision to withdraw from the Caribbean Federation. The difference this time was that we left the door open for 1 year. In that time, the Gleaner relented, decided to join Kana within the year, and we welcomed them with open arms, extending the full rights of foundation membership. What a pity our governments did not act similarly in 1961. For during the 12 months which followed, Tom Sherman was replaced by Managing Director Oliver Clark, who was to prove a strong Caribbean ally, in spite of the many differences we've had over the years. Oliver later replaced me as chairman 9 years later, when I stepped down as chairman of Kana. He also played an important role in defending press freedom as president of the Inter-American Press Association and promoting the declaration of Chapultepec. But there was another dimension to the Kana story and Tom Sherman's concerns. The Guyanese government had set its sights on controlling Kana from the outset with the assistance of the Jamaican Minister of State for Foreign Affairs, Dudley Thompson. We had no evidence of whether or not Jamaica's involvement in this Guyanese plot went higher up the ladder. But to be fair, I must say that initially we did not appreciate exactly how committed Guyana was to ensure that it controlled Kana. Fortunately, correspondence was uncovered to confirm that President Burnham, and I use the word I'm about to use very deliberately, had conspired with the general manager of one of Guyana's state agencies, who served on the Kana board, to play the role of a double agent. They had embarked upon a Machiavellian plot to emasculate Kana from the outset, attempting to mobilize Jamaican and Guyanese state media votes to appoint Burnham's general manager as the first chairman of Kana. Fortunately, the plot was uncovered by J.C. Prout, a Barbadian editor living and working in Jamaica, and that danger was averted. This is an unfortunate but instructive part of Caribbean history, the details of which have been revealed in my autobiography, Getting It Right, Winning Caribbean Press Freedom. Kana was launched in 1976 and maintained its independence throughout its existence. It has been lauded as a model news agency for the developing world at international forums and has served the region extraordinarily well. From the 3,000 words per day convoluted service run through London by Reuters, Kana had expanded that to 20,000 per day directly to Caribbean and other territorial newsrooms before it was forced out of business by technology. School textbook publishing. Then there was the project to reduce the cost of school textbooks by having them written, published, and printed in the Caribbean. The objective being to reduce the cost of school books. This was tackled in 1983-84 with the assistance of Dominica's Dame Eugenio Charles, who lined up the support of the prime ministers of Grenada, St. Vincent, St. Lucia, Dominica, St. Kitts, Nevis, and Antigua. Barbados stated their interest, but Prime Minister Sandiford preferred not to make a commitment until the project was launched. I was persona non grata with Dr. Williams and the Trinidad and Tobago government. So our proposal to the Minister of Education in that country never got off the ground. Jamaica had previously introduced its own formula for reprinting school books on newsprint. This was done with UK publishers, which achieved a significant saving in reducing the cost of primary school books. But even with all these good intentions, the reality was that some officers in the education departments of the Caribbean countries were already authors and were tied to UK publishers with attractive contracts. So obviously, you know what they wanted to happen. Status quo to continue. This was a major obstacle, but we persisted. We inspired a collective letter from the Ministries of Education of Grenada, Dominica, and St. Vincent, chartered a small aircraft and flew to the 3 islands to have the letter signed by the 3 ministers on the day before leaving for London to meet the publishers. We thought this might give us political weight, but not so. The English publishers had done their homework and were waiting for us. In London, we were told they did not need nor want us. They were printing in the Far East. They were happy with that arrangement. They were not concerned about our suggestions to achieve better prices. They had a captive market and already had textbooks authored by Caribbean authors. So in the nicest possible English language, it was conveyed to us. Jolly good try it, chaps, but shove off. But we persisted. We identified 10 experienced Caribbean authors, and with supporting staff, took 15 people to Spice Island Inn in Grenada for 2 days. We developed an action plan and a structure to commission publications in social studies, mathematics, and a comic book style series on Caribbean heroes, a series that could be added to so that students in the region would become familiar with Caribbean role models. Dame Eugenio and I visited Canada and obtained the assistance of the Caribbean International Bank, CEDA, for the project. Then the University of the West Indies, whom we had invited to identify with our efforts, intervened. They insisted that the printing of the books go out to tender as was being done in Jamaica. They were indifferent to the fact that in Jamaica, the Gleaner newspaper was the only organization capable of printing in such volumes, and that this constituted a monopoly. They were equally indifferent to the fact that what was being proposed was a Caribbean publishing industry for school books, rather than simply reprinting of newsprint from the UK. Massive confusion followed. Things were brought to a head at a meeting called in Barbados and chaired by Vice Chancellor Preston of the University of the West Indies. The seating arrangements for that meeting were dramatic. At the head of the 4-sided table was Vice Chancellor Preston and senior administrative staff of the university, ministers of education from the OECS were on the western side, representatives from UNESCO and CEDA, together with Caribbean authors of textbooks, were on the eastern side. And our team was on the southern side. The then managing director of the Gleaner, Oliver Clark, was seated alone in the middle of the 4 tables. Then, surprise. The Prime Minister of Dominica, Dame Eugenio, who was absolutely incensed over how the process of developing a Caribbean publishing industry for the printing of school books was being frustrated and monopolized, decided to make an unexpected and unannounced arrival at the meeting. She arrived unescorted that morning from Dominica. Vice Chancellor Preston made no attempt to hide his annoyance at her presence or his objective of introducing the Gleaner into the process. Dame Eugenio minced no words and strongly opposed his proposal. We had arrived at an impasse, and the meeting was silenced. The Vice Chancellor spoke briefly, brought the meeting to an unceremonious close, and abruptly walked out. We continued without Jamaica, CEDA and UNESCO, for the international agencies were not able to advance funding in the face of UWI's opposition. Caribbean governments placed direct orders for the books, but did not have the funds to pay even at the significantly reduced prices, a difficulty which only arose because CEDA and UNESCO could no longer participate. The books that were then produced and introduced into the school's curricula of Grenada, St. Vincent, Dominica, St. Lucia, were sent around for 3 terms. They were the Caribbean Junior Primary Maths, authors Evelyn Shepard and Agatha James; Caribbean Junior Primary Language Arts, author Claudette Thompson; Caribbean Junior Primary Maths 4, 2 social studies workbooks for CXC exams by Stevenson Grayson and Mervyn Sandy; 4 Caribbean national heroes in comic book style: Sir Arthur Lewis, the writer was Guy Ellis, the artist was Lisa Bajan; Sir Frank Worrell, writer was Guy Ellis, artist Sean Aberdeen; Eric Williams, again writer was Guy Ellis, artist Joanna Ferreira; and Clive Lloyd, writer was Guy Ellis, artist Sean Aberdeen. It was a monumental effort of organization to secure agreements for the concept, lining up the authors, obtaining approval from the governments and individual ministers of education, and overcoming the hostility of the UK publishers, all based on the dream of Caribbean integration. Some 10 years later, prior to publishing my autobiography, I wrote to Oliver Clark to ensure that the position of the University of the West Indies and the Gleaner were accurately reported, and to seek his recollection of events. His comments follow, and I quote, "I do not think Vice-Chancellor Preston was partisan. You do him an injustice. He felt that UWI owned the copyright to the books and therefore had the right to commercially exploit the titles. The model of going to tender is the only way of doing that. This was the mode we encouraged in Jamaica and which regularly delivers the print contract to our competitors, The Observer. This is all water under the bridge, except that the Caribbean still pays too much for textbooks." That's the end of Mr. Clark's statement. But it may have slipped Oliver in making the above statement that our complaint related to a period when the Gleaner was the only newspaper in Jamaica. The Observer did not exist at the time to which he referred. It commenced publication some 10 years after the textbook project. It was also difficult to understand why the UWI should insist on exploiting titles of books which they would play no part in publishing. I say no more. I took a 3-year leave of absence as managing director of the Express newspaper to function as a minister in the NAR government of Trinidad and Tobago at that time. But the textbook program was already well underway. The OECS government placed orders for the books, and they became part of the curricula. Unfortunately, it became an increasing problem for them to pay for them, and the Express was forced to finance the costs for an extended period. Eventually, they pulled the plug, and another potentially transformational Caribbean initiative self-destructed. From foreign to Caribbean ownership, the Jamaica Gleaner is the longest established newspaper in the English-speaking Caribbean. Established in 1834 with its weekly compendium of news, it has grown into a Jamaica institution respected for its powerful independence and significant investment in press freedom initiatives. It has been challenged by many private newspapers over the years, though never successfully. But now the Jamaican Observer has come on the scene in 1993 and has mounted an even more serious challenge. After 24 years, Jamaica appears now to being transformed into a genuine two-paper market. The Gleaner was the only daily newspaper in the Caribbean which survived under private national ownership until the Express came on the scene in 1967. Do excuse me. In those earlier years, the Gleaner's priorities did not extend to the Southern Caribbean, though in more recent times they have been very helpful, particularly with the Stabroek News in Guyana. The Express, which came on the scene in 1967, saw its future development and success in maintaining press freedom as being inextricably linked to strengthening Caribbean media. Once it succeeded in winning the battle against the Trinidad Guardian, which was the former market leader owned by Lord Thompson, the Express then embarked upon a policy of assistance to other Caribbean media houses. The Express has since worked with neighboring Caribbean countries to co-found 3 daily newspapers, The Nation of Barbados, Stabroek News in Guyana, and The Observer in Jamaica. And it has guided the turnaround to profitability of 4 weeklies: The Torchlight of Grenada, The Voice of St. Lucia, The Daily Chronicle of Dominica, and The Tobago News in Tobago. The question has been frequently asked, why did the Express not attempt to control any or all of the media houses it nursed into financial health? The answer is that it was so consumed with replacing foreign domination of Caribbean media with indigenous control that corporate benefit was never a part of its equation. The overriding objective was institutionalizing press freedom, and this could not be achieved by replacing London owners with Trinidad owners. Forthright and committed journalism was required to stop the spreading virus of state socialism promoted by the Burnhams, Bishops, and Cords of the day. Equally important is that it would not have worked. The pride and emerging independence of our Caribbean colleagues signaled clearly that they wanted to do their own thing. Many years later, one of the region's most respected academic and business consultants, the late Dr. Trevor Farrell, undertook a study of the model of the Express-Nation relationship. This had been used with minor adjustments in the 6 other instances where the Express had assisted other Caribbean newspapers. And this is what Dr. Farrell had to say. In the present environment of mergers, takeovers, and expansions in the Caribbean, the relationship between the Barbadian and Trinidadian mass communication companies represents the oldest cross-border business alliance in the region. The Caribbean Communications Network, which owns the Express newspapers, provided invaluable assistance to the nation in its formative years. The nation is currently celebrating its 30th anniversary. I have been telling people in Trinidad about this story and suggesting to them that the way in which cross-border investments need to take place is using the CCN nation mix to build relationships that both parties feel is in their best interest, unquote. So that you may better understand the pride and independence of our regional colleagues, let the mood of the Caribbean at the time emerge from the following comments, which speak for themselves. In Grenada, in 1973, Royal Charles, a personal friend from Grenada, who knew what had been accomplished with the Express, came to see me in Trinidad with the chairman of the Grenada Torchlight Company seeking assistance. I responded to his inquiry about costs, saying there would be no charge other than recovering our costs. Chairman D.M.B. Cromwell took over. "Young man," he said, "what are your intentions?" I have come here because Raul has asked me to do so, but I do not like Trinidadians. I do not trust them. I do not believe that you will assist in the way you describe just because you know Raul. I suspect you really want to take over the Torchlight, and it is not for sale, unquote. In Barbados in 1974, the founding editor of the Nation newspaper, Harold Hoyt, revealed in his book, The Express Story, and I quote, "One director accused us of not understanding the ultimate goal of Ken Gordon was to own and control the media of Barbados. He charged that those directors who accepted Ken Gordon at his word must recognize that Santa Claus was a myth," unquote. 4 years later, late Prime Minister Tom Adams at the opening of the Nation Fontebelle office. "Any enterprise which can in 4 short years command such a standing as is now enjoyed by the nation must give the lie to a sometimes expressed notion that Caribbean men and women can do little or nothing on their own." On the 25th anniversary of the nation, Prime Minister Owen Arthur, "You are a symbol of the nation's confidence. Barbados at all levels needs symbols of confidence, excellence, and achievement. You are one such." Dominica in 1983, Philip Nassif, Dominica's leading businessman, and I quote, "In 1983, the New Chronicle was facing closure because of low circulation and advertising. The board requested the assistance of Mr. Gordon, the Chief Executive Officer of the Express. Within weeks, administration and editorial support was arranged through the valued services of Mr. George John and Leslie Brunton. Within 6 months, editorial improved, distribution doubled, and the Chronicle has survived and continues to play an important role in the life of Dominica." The enormous problems of Guyana and what they had to overcome need to be understood. A statement from the late David de Carys, then a prominent attorney in Guyana, is reproduced. And again, I must apologize for the frequent mention of my name, but accuracy is necessary. "The Stabroek News could not have started without Ken Gordon's help. Having read an interview he had done with President Hoyt in which he raised the possibility of opening a newspaper in Guyana, at the time the media here were completely state-controlled, I asked him if he was planning to start a newspaper in Guyana. He said he was not, but if I was, he would do all he could to help. To my consternation, as I had not yet fully made up my mind but had gone essentially on an exploratory mission, Ken summoned his secretary and dictated the outline of a plan of action to start a newspaper in Guyana. I left his office in a daze, vaguely aware that I had embarked on a venture that would radically affect both my career as a lawyer and my life. Shortly after, Gordon and I made another call on President Hoyt, who confirmed that the government had no objection to a newspaper being started, but he said that he could not afford to allocate foreign currency to import newsprint and other items. Ken was able to get a grant from the National Endowment for Democracy in Washington, which enabled us to start publishing as a weekly newspaper in November of 1986. We had no press. The flats were prepared in Guyana and taken over to Trinidad every week by my wife, Doreen. The Express would fit in the printing of our newspaper with their printing schedule, and Doreen would come back to Guyana with the papers. That arrangement lasted for about 9 months until we were able to acquire a second-hand press by September of 1987 and to start printing in Guyana. From the beginning, throughout several preliminary meetings in Port of Spain and Guyana, Ken was as good as his word and gave all the backup we needed. He provided training and other assistance from time to time, and we have continued to maintain excellent relations with the Trinidad Express. In November 1980, Ken flew to Guyana for the official launching of the Stabroek News, which marked the return of a free press to Guyana after years of monopolized state control. It was a significant occasion, unquote. The Stabroek News is another outstanding Caribbean success story. which has worked its way through the enormous difficulties of a Guyanese economy starved for foreign exchange. David and his wife, Doreen, made an outstanding team, and Guyana today enjoys a free and independent media because the DeCaries family had courage to walk away if that became necessary. Fortunately, the performance of the newspaper is now justifying the risk they took. Then, of course, we had the expansion to electronic media with the Gleaner and Radio Jamaica's merger at the northern end of the Caribbean, and the Nation and Express into One Caribbean in the south. There have been minor changes of ownership in some of the islands, but the structure of indigenous ownership remains intact. Only DirecTV, which was originally brought into the Caribbean by the Express and then subsequently reverted to its original Cisneros Venezuelan family, is now owned by a U.S. corporation. The bottom line is that the transformation from foreign to indigenous control of our media in the Caribbean would not have occurred if the courage and independence of our Caribbean colleagues had not been fully respected. And now we look at some important interventions from an indigenous media, which have in many instances altered the pattern of events in the region. I'll quote Barbados first. In 1974, Prime Minister Barrow of Barbados sought to emulate Prime Minister Burnham's example in Guyana of taking over media houses. Barrow's government was in the process of buying out the Barbados Advocate, which was owned by Thompson, when the Nation broke the story. A blazing headline told the nation of Barbados, the Advocate sold. Public opinion exploded. So did Barrow, who also pulled back. Takeover plans abandoned. A significant move towards state socialism was stopped dead in its tracks. In 1976, Barbadian gunrunner Sidney Burnett Allen, living in the UK, and Prime Minister Patrick John of Dominica concocted a far-fetched scheme to create the Commonwealth of Dominica and Barbados, merging the two islands into one state. The plot was exposed by the Nation. Again, the attempt was abandoned. Allen was later arrested in a boat laden with ammunition on the path to Barbados. In 1974, at the height of the energy crisis, long lines at gas stations, the Nation exposed a privileged pump with access to unlimited supply of gas for ministers and friends only. Result, end of privileged pump. In 1983, cricketers from Barbados, Guyana, Jamaica, Combined Islands signed cricket contracts to play in apartheid South Africa. The Nation reporter discovered the plan, arranged a booking on the same flight to Miami, confronted the players while airborne. They admitted and had the decency to toast themselves in relief over the fact that the plan was blown. Result, life ban on playing cricket, which was later reduced to 7 years. Jamaica, and I name one from Jamaica because it's so powerful, this one. Using the powers of its public emergency in 1976, the Jamaican government introduced censorship of the media, a requirement to have news approved by government before publishing. The Gleaner newspaper was steadfast in its refusal to submit its publication for censorship. The Caribbean owes the Gleaner an ongoing debt of thanks for this historical example of courage. Trinidad and Tobago. In 1971, a black American dentist, Dr. Hanna, and his wife were forbidden from playing tennis at the Trinidad Country Club. An Express investigation exploded the story mounted an ongoing crusade on grounds of discrimination, Chief Justice Clement Phillip appointed a one-man commission of inquiry, and it was mildly ended by an apology to the Hannahs, and the business community mounted an advertising boycott to close down the Express. They were very close to doing so. 12 writs were filed in the courts by the Country Club Board. Those writs are still being awaited call in court. In 1972, Black Power demonstrations, the Express condemned the behavior of the people who were on the roads and making such a fuss, but called on the Trinidad society to accept part of the responsibility and to look within itself for answers. It also mobilized strong support calling for changes, and it was strongly supported by Archbishop Pantin of the Roman Catholic Church. The result, the advertising boycott, which was still going on, was intensified. But the unexpected consequence was that the circulation climbed so high that we were able to reduce the size of the newspaper and let the cost of the newspaper cover the cost of production. So every time we sold a new newspaper, we were making more money. This turned around, changed the Express from the disaster to which it was headed into growth from which it has never turned back. Sometime in the mid-1970s, a Public Order Act was introduced by the PNM government calling for harsh measures to cope with national unrest. Again, the Express led a crusade against the act, forcing it to be withdrawn by the government. In 1997, the UNC government, this is the other government, invited comments on media reform in a green paper designed to erode press freedom. Another Express crusade forced the withdrawal of the green paper with great embarrassment to the government. The Prime Minister at the time, Mr. Pandey, then attacked the Chief Executive of the Express in a public address. The CEO took the Prime Minister to court. Justice Jamada forcefully concluded, and I quote, "On the evidence in this case, the Prime Minister could never have honestly or reasonably believed that the plaintiff was a pseudo-racist. In my opinion, the Prime Minister," not my opinion, this is the judge. "In my opinion, the Prime Minister was actuated by malice." This matter was pursued all the way to the Privy Council. It was heard by some 8 justices in its passage through the High Court, Appeal Court, and Privy Council. The acting Chief Justice Sharma was the only dissenting judgment at the level of the Appeal Court. He later publicly admitted, after being challenged, that he had made a mistake and had attributed to the plaintiff statements which the court records confirmed had not only never been made, but had been categorically denied by the plaintiff under cross-examination. And so, my young friends and more mature audience, I've come to the end of my Caribbean journey as you prepare for the beginning of yours. I wish I had brought my crystal ball with me today, for it may have signaled a conclusion to Caribbean integration which the reality of our experience denies. Its logic cannot be faulted, but its implementation quickly turns into a nightmare as self-inflicted obstacles multiply. Like establishing the structure of the Caribbean Court of Justice, then frustrating its operation. Like denying the Caribbean textbook publishing project. Like the extraordinary costs of governments of 13 tiny islands, many with less than 100,000 people, all insisting on sovereignty. Like the pomp and pageantry of a CARICOM heads of government meeting with 13 national flags, 13 anthems, 13 heads of state with supporting establishments, 13 prime ministers with 13 cabinets, some larger than the United States and England, 13 leaders of the opposition, 13 parliaments, 70 ambassadors, foreign missions and consulates, all with heavy foreign exchange commitments, all to support the governments of 6 million people, smaller numbers than a state in the United States in many cases. Think of what such revenues could do for Caribbean development. This is our reality, which our political leaders cannot find the political will to change. But the logic of working together must continue. Unlike 1961, when the federal experiment was politically driven, now the links are being driven between Caribbean people and our organizations. People who know today infinitely more about each other than they did 56 years ago. And indigenous media is a powerful resource to grow and develop these linkages. More than ever, communication strengths will expand the advantages of technology as you prepare yourselves to lift your horizons and challenge the world. Usain Bolt has done it. So has Brian Lara. So have our other Caribbean Nobel laureates and champions. Why not you? The impossible barriers no longer exist. Let your personal development be your primary focus at this time. I share with you some guidelines which may assist in confronting our ever-shrinking world. Think big. Everything is possible. Determine where you want to be in 10 and 15 years, then plan how to get there. Remember that every plan must have a worst-case scenario and be guided by that prospect. Identify landmarks to monitor progress. Liming and drifting with the crowd is the surest way to mediocrity. Do not be afraid to be alone in your convictions or to fight for them. When you fall, and you will, get up and start again. That's often when opportunity arises. Do not magnify problems. The qualities that lead to achievement are enthusiasm, creativity, a thirst for answers, integrity, and professionalism. Achievement is not an end in itself. It is an ongoing process which is ever grappling with the next hurdle. Success cannot be achieved by material accomplishments alone. It is a man or woman you become, the family you love, the people you help, and how well you serve your God and your country that will ultimately determine your success or failure. So congratulations on the road you have traveled, and good luck with the road ahead. Thank you.
Wow. You know you're much richer for having listened to what he just said. All students of CARIMAC, I'm empowered, in fact, by what I just heard. You can see the type of sacrifices made by Ken Gordon and the team. You can see how hard we fought for press freedom and how important it is that we do not allow this to change. How important it is that we do not allow advertisers to dictate what happens in the news. How important it is that we remain as gatekeepers. Mr. Gordon, thank you, sir. I really appreciate this. I am richer myself for having listened to you this evening. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to be doing question and answers, but before that, we want to invite the CARIMAC Director, Professor Houghton Dunn to bring remarks. Let me introduce him to you properly. Professor Houghton Dunn is a professor of communications policy and digital media and director of both the Caribbean Institute of Media and Communication and the MONA ICT Policy Center at the University of the West Indies. Professor Dunn is chairman of Jamaica's Regulatory Broadcasting Commission and a former Secretary General of the International Association for Media and Communication Research. And he is an award-winning researcher, multi-published author, and book editor. Ladies and gentlemen, help me to welcome Professor Houghton Dunn.
Mr. Ken Gordon, lecture presenter and retired chairman of the CCN group, our Deputy Mayor, Councillor Leroy Williams, Mr. Gary Allen, Group Managing Director of the RJR Group, and I believe acting president of the Caribbean Broadcasting Union, Mr. Patrick Prendergast, Director WJC Campus, Mr. Stephen Campbell, the coordinator for CARIMAC here at the Western Jamaica campus, other lecturers, members of staff, students coming from various territories of the Caribbean, countries of the Caribbean, and parts of Jamaica. Friends all, good evening. I have customarily for the last few years come to this lecture to sit, listen, and learn, and deepen my own grasp and understanding of many of the issues at play in our Caribbean region. This occasion is no exception, and we are all in the debt of Mr. Ken Gordon for sharing the perspectives that he has done, and to do so from a first-hand perspective, having lived it, and is able to speak to us about it. As is customary, I come to these events with some notes of my own. A few show nothing on the scale of Mr. Gordon's, but some thoughts that I wanted to share. And I will do so in a cryptic kind of way. But again, as has happened on previous occasions, the presenter has elicited in me the interest and the desire to make a few remarks on matters that have come into play in the course of the lecture presentation. Let me, first of all, endorse the very important point made by Mr. Gordon at the very end of his presentation, when he observed that in today's Caribbean, integration is not so much about the machinations of multiple prime ministers of microstates throughout the region, but it is centrally concerned with the extent to which the people of the Caribbean are able better to interact with ourselves and to build a Caribbean that we are proud of and can move forward on. Not only have the Caribbean people and our institutions played a very critical role in what is emerging now of our Caribbean, but so has technology, the internet perhaps, even in the absence of the Caribbean News Agency, is playing a very important role, though not uniquely in the Caribbean, in enabling many of our young people and our citizens to interact together in a way perhaps that we were not able to do for some time. So integration is very important, though it's not always going to be led and driven by these political leaders. If I may say so, among the institutions that have got it together is the University of the West Indies, the institution of which so many of us in the room are a part, and got it together since 1948 and kept it together these last 69 years. And the University of the West Indies remains one of the institutions representing the diversity and the power of our collective will. And it is an institution that we must be proud about. In a subsidiary way, CARIMAC has played its part in getting it together as a region, having been established 42 years ago and kept it together, but like the University of the West Indies, expanded, and we have grown to become not only a multi-campus but a multi-program institution, part of this very Caribbean of ours. You've heard mentioned a slice of Caribbean history, bearing primarily on that part of our history from the 1970s earlier and on to parts of the 1980s and so on, brought up to date by additional observations by our guest speaker. I want to allude to one of our political leaders of the Caribbean who made an interesting remark that has stuck in my mind and formed part of the research that I've been engaged with. I speak of none other than the late Barbados Prime Minister, Errol Barrow. Mr. Gordon mentioned Mr. Barrow, Errol Barrow. Stalwart, national hero of Barbados. And Mr. Barrow made the observation among a discourse in which he was engaged that we must not be found, quote, loitering on colonial premises after closing time. Errol Barrow said, we must not be found loitering on colonial premises after closing time. The symbolism of his message is inescapable. And what he was saying to us as Caribbean people is that we must advance the decolonization project. And we must become a people capable of standing on our own ground. And that remains a very important part of the legacy that people like Mr. Barrow, people like Ken Gordon, people like Michael Manley and others bequeathed to us even if they did so from different political perspectives. The notion of a Caribbean is one that has had its own ups and downs. We talked today about Brexit. We had our equivalent of the Brexit. Jamaica was the exiting party in that Brexit. But we fashioned out of that moment different goals, sub-goals, but maintaining that same central goal of driving our Caribbean forward. One of the key parts of observing the last 50 to 60 years is that many of the political projects for integration have foundered. And many of the other projects driven by citizens and agencies have been sustained. We heard from Mr. Gordon that the Federation did not survive. We heard that Kana did not survive. We heard that the textbook project did not survive. All political enterprises encouraged and supported by citizens, but driven by political decision making. But West Indies cricket, whatever we might want to think about it, has survived. Limpingly, haltingly, but it has survived. University of the West Indies has survived. And many projects that have grown out of national enterprise, Carnival, Boys and Girls Champs, are Caribbeanizing themselves and surviving. So we live in a very interesting time. And it is important that we take heed and counsel of what we can learn from past years, from persons like Mr. Gordon, from persons like Errol Barrow, and many others. One leader that we don't hear often mentioned in journalistic and media fora such as these is a man called Theodore Seeley. Many of you perhaps haven't even ever heard his name. He is the late, great editor-in-chief of the Gleaner Company and a great builder of part of what we have become here in the Caribbean. And Mr. Seeley was among those who helped to form CARIMAC. And I think he was on the steering committee that helped to establish CARIMAC. But most of all, he provided formidable leadership in fostering a whole generation of media practitioners, even before CARIMAC came into existence. And I ask you to write that name down and never to forget that among those who took us to this place would be someone such as Theodore Seeley. I want to just say a few more words about what we are doing here at CARIMAC, and also to say a word about where we are looking. This new academic year, the new academic year which will be approaching, will be one of great interest. But before we get to the new academic year, many of you would be looking to graduate and to join the workforce. CARIMAC takes pride and pleasure in helping to build what you have become in your professional careers, and we stand ready to continue to help as you go out into that world of work. It's a world of work that has transformed itself tremendously by technology. you will find that in many places, technologies such as robotics, robots, artificial intelligence, and those kinds of innovations will be part of what you will be expected to work alongside. I just came down from Kingston by car, and I stopped at the toll booth, the toll plaza on the highway road. When I pulled up, there was nobody in the window, and I was instructed to draw up near to the machine and take a card. And the machine said, "Please take the card," which I did. And once I took the card, it says, "Thank you, have a safe journey." The machine said that, right? Now, when we talk about robots, we are looking for something with a gobbledygook language and walking in a strange way. But I can tell you, that's a robot. That's a robot. And that robot in Jamaica has already taken at least one job of the person sitting in that window. So it's not a world of ifs or maybes that you're entering. It's a world of real technological transformation. I was asked to deliver 2 or 3 days ago something called the Faculty of Humanities and Education Distinguished Lecture. And the one point I hope I left with that particular audience is that we live at a time that is enacting something that I called globalization from within. Globalization from within. And I will ask you to think and read about that concept that tells us essentially that every single idea or concept that you have must be valued and must be advanced to the best of your ability without letting anyone tell you that it's a foolish idea or it cannot work or whatever. Defend, protect, and promote your idea. If it proves wrong and you're convinced about it, abandon it and think afresh, start anew and get going. But it is simple ideas by everyday people like us that can make a difference in the world, and that those ideas have made a difference in the world by people within countries like ours, within regions like ours, but whose ideas have globalized from within. So I'll ask you to think about that a bit more. As the new academic year approaches, I just wanted to let you know that the University of the West Indies, in its wisdom, and after considerable amounts of considerable deliberation, has acceded to a recommendation from the leadership of CARIMAC that the name of the organization CARIMAC should remain CARIMAC, but that CARIMAC will now stand for the Caribbean School of Media and Communication. So from the 1st of August, you will be part, those of you who will remain with us, of what will be known as the Caribbean School of Media and Communication. It's a nod to our growth and expansion. It's a nod to the work that you have been doing, that your lecturers have been doing, and the leadership that we have offered, both at the Mona campus and in this campus. It's a step up on the food chain in the academic community globally, and it is something that we are quite proud about. The second thing I want to say, particularly to our CARIMAC students, is that within the academy, we, from time to time, go on academic leave called sabbatical. Now, I mentioned the word sabbatical to a few friends of mine, and they said that it really represented either pre-retirement or vacation. Well, a sabbatical is neither pre-retirement or vacation. It is an opportunity that academics and scholars like myself and others around us do take from time to time to go away and tour other institutions, teach in other institutions, write books, but come back to do our jobs in our home institution. Well, after my long stint at the university without a sabbatical, I will go on sabbatical in the next academic year, starting from August. I'll be going to many different places, Southern Africa for one thing, and to Europe, my own home universities, and so on. And so if you don't see me treading the pathways of the campus as often as I have done from time to time, then you know perhaps that I am abroad. We have asked Dr. Livingston White to stand in the position of acting director, and I am sure that you will get to see him walking in my place from time to time here. But before I close, I just want to wish our students all the best, to thank you for organizing this event. As has been said before, it would take an exceptional class to get someone like Ken Gordon here with you today. And I would ask you to give him another round of applause, because we are benefiting so tremendously. And for those of you who are sitting exams, I want to wish you all the best in your forthcoming examinations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Dunn. I just wish to make a correction in relation to a position that I said that he still has, which he doesn't anymore, as Broadcasting Commission Chairman. He's a former chairman of the Broadcasting Commission. You know, earlier, a gentleman walked into the room, and I should have acknowledged him officially, because he's one of my bosses. And I know that I still have a job, so I'm not worried, because it's not dependent on whether or not I introduce him to an audience, to be honest with you. But I want to recognize a gentleman in media who is very, very important, Mr. Gary Allen, Managing Director of the RJR Gleaner Group of Companies. All the way from Kingston. So you know that you have done something very good to have someone like Mr. Allen in your midst this evening. You have Professor Dunn, you have the Deputy Mayor, you have Ken Gordon, all the way from, where are you living now, sir? Trinidad? All right. And we have his son, who hardly comes to the university, Douglas Gordon. So we did well. We did very, very well. I think you need to give yourselves a round of applause. We're now into the question and answer section, all right? But before we go there, earlier, I was given an envelope in my package which had dinner for two valued at $100 US at Margaritaville. So it had nothing on it, so I said it was mine. I really thought I was being given $100 for dinner at Margaritaville, and I really appreciated it, only to look further on the program to see that one of you is likely to win this by answering a question. So I won't win it, but I can go to Margaritaville. I know everybody down there, so it's all right. So the question is, whoever answers this question wins the prize. Name one of the organizations, and I think this is too easy a question, but what can I say? One of the organizations that Ken Gordon was key in establishing. You have to put up your hand now to answer. Saw a lady in the red blouse over there first. Yeah, you, same one. I'm sorry, guys. She put up her hand first. You need to come tell us tell us the answer. All right, you're right. For years I thought Douglas Gordon was involved in the Observer. I didn't know it was his father. Everything he did it with the Observer until he realized that the Gleaner was the better newspaper. You've won yourself a prize, darling. You can come up and get it, please. Oh my God. Congratulations. Boy, I tell you, girl, lucky. So now we are opening the floor for you to ask your questions of Mr. Gordon. And I know that you have questions. Questions and answers that you'll get that will help you throughout your education. Because we're talking about a man that is when he has really done a fantastic job as it relates to media. Right? Do we have any questions for Mr. Gordon? Where's the CAB team? No questions for Mr. Gordon? You are satisfied? He did so well? All right. I mean, I'm not in agreement with you, but okay. I guess you all want to go home at some time as well, eh? And you want to see the dancers that we have for you as well. All right, okay. We won't pressure Mr. Gordon into doing... Pardon me? They're shy? No, sir. When I was going to this university, there was not one shy bone inside of me. I don't believe there's no Janet Silvera in the audience. There's no... Eh? Okay, all right. All right, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, we now invite a group by the name of Garrison Youth. I hear that them call themselves GRSN. Is that it? All right. And you're going to be doing a Caribbean dance medley? I wonder what that looks like. All right, something like that. Your face look familiar. Let me know you. All right.
Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please? The evening what you are about to witness is real.
We have a truck on the road. We have a truck on the road.
Let me hear something.
Oh my God!
time for the WWC CARIMAC Lecture, with two gentlemen will be settling the dispute the Caribbean with the game of cricket. I'm Ian Bishop, alongside me, Michael Holley. And the game is about to roll on. The bowler sports his run. He delivers the ball. What a hit! He goes straight up in the air. Is he going after it? The bowler is going out.
You guys must tell me what that last dance was, if it was soca or reggae. I'm not sure. But it just goes to show, that infusion, real Caribbean music. Is what happened. I'm not dancing, you know? We are check on the road. You know, it's as if people don't like when I stand up on a stage and I don't dance or something. Is what happened. You were waiting for me. I like that. So, ladies and gentlemen, the team behind all of this will now launch a guide to One Caribbean. So I now invite Miss Carissa Warner to deliver launch remarks. I'm not inviting you to come on stage like that without you telling me which of the countries you're from.
Antigua and Barbuda.
All right.
Director of the University of West Indies, Mona Western Jamaica campus, Mr. Patrick Prendergast. Director of the Caribbean Institute of Media and Communication, Professor Hopton Dunn. The coordinator of CARIMAC at UWJC, Mr. Stefan Campbell. Special guest speaker, Mr. Kenneth Gordon. Deputy Mayor of Montego Bay, Mr. Leroy Williams. Regional Director West of the Jamaica Public Service, Ms. Tishura Gibbs. Managing Director of the RJR Communications Group, Mr. Gary Allen. Representatives from the Jamaica Information Service, other members of the media, distinguished guests, family, friends, staff, students, good evening. The Jamaican motto, out of many one people, transcends more than only Jamaica. It rings true for all the peoples across the entire Caribbean. It is for that reason that the 2016-2017 Communication Analysis and Planning class decided to launch the Guide to One Caribbean, the first English-speaking edition. As one Caribbean people, it is important for us to stand united with each other, and doing so requires an understanding of our histories and our cultures. A Guide to One Caribbean is our attempt at bridging that gap. The journal includes information on 16 English-speaking Caribbean nations, with topics ranging from history to dialects and major festivals. As such, it is my great honor to present the first ever Guide to One Caribbean to the public this evening. The text is also available for free download at www.wjcinsider.wordpress.com. We also have this evening the first ever printed journals, which we would like to specially present to two key figures here with us this evening. I'd like to call on Ms. Jadine Barker, and Ms. Heather Epps to assist with the presentation. Mr. Gordon, it is our honor to present you with the first printed copy of A Guide to One Caribbean. Thank you, Mr. Gordon. Equally so, it is our honor to present Professor Hobson Dunn with the second ever print copy of the guide. Last, and certainly by no means least, to our own dear WJC, we present a copy. Mr. Prendergast, will you please do us the honors? Thank you, Mr. Prendergast. The national motto of my home country, Antigua and Barbuda, calls for us to each endeavor and all achieve. We hope that this body of work truly brings us closer in our journey to becoming one Caribbean. And now, Mr. Vera will lead us through the rest of this evening's proceedings.
Thank you very much, Carissa. We now invite the WJC CARIMAC coordinator, Mr. Stephen Campbell, to do the vote of thanks. I must tell you that you have done a fantastic job with these students. Yes.
I'll take 15% of the credit for it. Unfortunately, I can't get any grade for it, so thank you very much, Janet. Good evening, everyone. I know I'm the only thing that stands between you and the refreshments outside. And I think if it's one thing that unites the Caribbean, it's food. And I saw spirits on the wall as well. And I know it's I think we all know as Caribbean people what type of spirits they're talking about, which is another form of unity among all of us. But before I get into it, I want to express deep pride for what I witnessed today. When I came to Jamaica 10 years ago, from reliable sources, I realized I couldn't make it in the other form of Caribbean integration, which is West Indies cricket. I thought that an education would expose me to other areas and regions of the Caribbean. And to my surprise, the first assignment we got was a critical book review of Getting It Right by Mr. Ken Gordon, given to us by the late Professor Agri Brown. And I think it was a good template, and what it did, it inspired my imagination. Sorry, this is not mine. It inspired my imagination as it relates to how an individual from one island or one territory within the Caribbean region can have such a huge impact on the overall region and by extension the world. Because that book, I don't think it has stopped within the boundaries or the borders of CARIMAC, and I don't think it has stopped within the boundaries and the borders of the Caribbean. And so I'm so grateful for this group for turning an idea, and believe me, when I suggested it, I thought it was a fruit that they would definitely fall beneath. Sorry, I'm not saying that I didn't expect much, but I was pleasantly surprised that you all not only met that fruit, I think you all grew an entirely new tree. And so I want for all of us to join me in giving them a sincere and a deep round of applause. And for the students that follow, thank you. I know you, yes, so I think you have to grow your own orchard next semester. And I'm going to start suggesting, and I'm going to ask Mr. Gordon to suggest some people for next semester, for next year, so they can start working on it from now. But, Mr. Gordon, the words can't express seeing how I could have lived vicariously through you. This is 74, 75, all the way through the 80s. I was born in the late 80s. So to experience all of those things and to see it culminate from this end, started as a student, culminating from this end and this side, I am very, very, very grateful, very, very humbled. And as Professor Dunn said, I also walk away feeling very rich with a very new perspective on what success is and what success could be. And at this time, we want to show our gratitude to you, and I would invite Ms. Judine Barker to gift you with our token of appreciation. And I'd also ask for the campus director and the director of CARIMAC to also join in this shot. Thank you very much. Let's give him a round of applause again. As it relates to the questions and answers, luckily we've been in this business for long enough. So it's a bit of a preemptive strike. The students have 2 questions related to it on their examination that they're going to have to answer as it relates to the public lecture. So I would share their questions, or I'd share their responses to some of the questions I assume they would have loved to ask. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. To the sponsors, I think, as we were having a discussion earlier, I think a lot of the things we do as a university and as a department, we cannot do without these relationships. And so for all of the sponsors that contributed in a significant way to making this happen, I would like to show all our gratitude this afternoon. Let's give them a round of applause. I will be benefiting from a dinner for 2 at Margaritaville. I was reliably informed. So I'm very much grateful for this sponsorship. For every single person who made it possible this afternoon into this evening, I thank you. And this is only a seed, and this is only the beginning of so many things to come. As Professor Dunn said, everyone has an individual idea. And I think as Caribbean people, if it's one area that we are very much gifted in, it's the creation of ideas. The creativity, the ability to start something or to conceive of something and watch it blossom into all the things that we benefit from and experience today. And while the Federation may have failed and Carnival succeeded, I think it's not the end, but it's only a continuation of what we as Caribbean people can do. So for everyone who is here this evening, I would like to thank you all. Refreshments are on the outside. I hope we can continue this conversation and let this conversation not only be verbal. Let us use the platforms that are available to us now that may not have been available in the 70s and the 80s to further our ideas, to create what we love to create and what we need to create so that we may all benefit in the long run. Thank you so very much and have a good night. Thank you. Oh, God. Oh, you know, what? You want to teach? You don't want to teach? Why?
No, I don't want to teach. No, I don't
We're bringing the diploma down here.
I don't want to teach.
You have to do a guest lecture.
I don't want to teach.